Well, apparently, Joe Biden, or I should say the Biden administration, is planning on hiking taxes in America in the middle of a pretty bad recession. Many Americans in many parts of the country may not feel like they're in a recession. Here in Florida, things feel pretty normal. Things haven't slowed down much at all. Housing prices are higher than ever. Cost of living is, through the roof. It's pretty unaffordable in much of this state. But, by modern American standards, the more unaffordable the cost of living is, the better people consider the economy to be doing. And I won't get into why I think that is wrong, but that's reality. Uh, and the reason for this, the reason why people feel like they're doing good, is because despite the fact that you've had these shutdowns across the country, most people have not had to make a ton of sacrifices when it comes to their consumption. People have stopped producing in much of the country. A lot of businesses have been destroyed. But people largely are still consuming goods. There's an eviction moratorium and mortgage forbearance and all these various programs, enhanced unemployment benefits, which have enabled people to continue consuming and consuming despite their lost income in terms of what they're actually producing. And the net result of this has been quite interesting. Anyone who follows importing and exporting, trade deficits, and the like, you'll know that the trade deficit has never been worse than it is right now. And a symptom of that we're observing off of America's ports is that container ships are building up off the coasts, and there are ships just full of empty containers waiting to go back to mostly China and India and other places, waiting to be filled with American goods to send back there. But America's trade deficit is so huge that you have, so many net imports coming into the country that all these ships are coming here, and there's not enough goods for them to take back to these other countries. And this, of course, will make shipping very expensive because these ships don't want to go back empty because, then they're sort of wasting a trip. They're not getting paid any freight, so they're going to have to make that up, on a one way. If they can't make money both ways, then they're going to have to make all their money going one way on that trip. And as I said, the reason for this is that Americans are consuming without producing. This is the most visceral example of that. Literally, America's not producing enough stuff to fill these ships to go back across the world. All the ships are coming and bringing goods to America, but no goods are leaving America on these ships. There's no international trade. It's just America sends out dollars that are being printed by the Fed, and the rest of the world just supplies us with goods. And so our economy is in very bad shape, and frankly, the unemployment rate is still very high. And that's with the way that unemployment is measured these days, which is not the most honest way in the world. Unemployment is still pretty high. And so in this environment, where you have a very poor economy, an economy that is teetering on the brink, when you have a nation of people whose standard of living is only really being propped up by government handouts and by a forbearance of both rent and mortgage payments, both of which are not forgiven, but both of which must ultimately be paid back. In this environment, the Biden administration is considering raising taxes, which just has not been done before. I mean, this goes against, these people are supposed to be Keynesians. I'm not a Keynesian, but I mean, the whole idea of Keynesianism is counter-cyclical policy. And what that means is that you don't raise taxes during recession. If anything, you're going to cut taxes during recession. And when you're in a boom, that is the time when you might raise taxes if you're going to do it at all. In other words, you don't want to kick the economy while it's already down. You don't want to add extra drag when the economy is trying to rebuild itself. Of course, we're nowhere near being able to rebuild this economy yet. This economy is still falling. It has a long way to go. And, the government has just been sort of dangling there with their arms, holding on with one hand, keeping everybody from going over the cliff. And so imagine that you have the federal government hanging on to the U.S. economy with one hand, not bringing them back up, but not pulling them back up off the ledge and back on top of the cliff, but just sort of dangling them there, and then handing them a 10-pound weight and saying, "Here, hold this." That's what you're doing when you raise taxes during a recession. Now, the way they get around this is they say, well, we're not raising taxes on the average person, raising taxes on people who make over $400,000, raising taxes on corporations, and raising taxes on raising capital gains taxes for people who make over $1 million a year. And you say, well, that doesn't affect me, which I'm sure almost nobody listening to this will that affect. Certainly doesn't affect me personally. But I hate to say this, but our economy is highly financialized. The folks making over $400,000 a year, corporations, folks who pay capital gains, all this is where our GDP comes from. America's economy is built on the wealth effect. That's not a very good foundation, because, as I've explained in the past, we live and die by stock market valuations, by asset prices in general. And when you raise taxes on things like corporations or capital gains or high income brackets, well, then those assets are going to lose value. I mean, really, the first 2 years of the Trump administration, the supposed, what Trump touted as the greatest economy in American history, was just a corporate tax rate being cut and leading to a revaluation of the stock market. Because, lo and behold, when you cut a company's tax rate, all else equal, their profit is going to increase, and so that company is going to make more money, and so therefore their stock will be worth more. It'll have a higher value because it will be producing more. It'll be more profitable with a lower tax rate. And so stocks, which were already overvalued back in 2016, went to the moon. And that was the first initial bubble of the Trump administration, which somewhat popped. The air started to come out in December 2018. That was the big boof. And then it's been a whole series of actions by the Fed ever since. But back then, that was the result of the Fed tightening. So the federal government loosened, in the Keynesian sense, they loosened fiscal policy at the federal level, at the government level, by cutting taxes. But then the Fed tightened monetary policy by letting the balance sheet run off. And I won't get into that, but if the Fed and the federal government do opposite things, they'll cancel each other out. So right now, the Fed has been, running full steam ahead, trying to print as much money as they can to prop up the financial markets, because they understand that is the whole of the U.S. economy. The U.S. economy is a house of cards built on a stock market bubble. And the Fed has been saying that the federal government needs to step in and sort of act in the same direction by having a more aggressive fiscal policy. And again, these are the kind of euphemisms they use, so you kind of have to decode that. What he's saying is he wants the federal government to run big deficits. And no problem there. The federal government has been happy to run big deficits. And raising taxes is not going to get rid of the deficit. It's not going to reduce the deficit much at all. It's not going to increase tax revenues all that much. But it is going to put a drag on the stock market. It's going to reverse, in part, because they're only talking about raising the corporate tax from 21% to 28%, rather than going back to, I believe it was 35% before Trump. And of course, raising the capital gains tax will change the calculus for the major investors. The richest people, the richest people in America are the ones who drive the market. And so if their taxes go up, that's going to change how they invest. And considering how precarious the Fed's grip over financial markets is at the moment, I can't help but think that this tax proposal, if passed, would possibly destabilize things a little more, and that the Fed might not be able to handle it. Now, I say that, but no matter what has happened so far in the past few years, the Fed has been able to just plow right through it, and have been able to continue full steam ahead with their money printing shenanigans. And at the end of the day, no matter how bad things look, the stock market always goes up, thanks to Big Daddy Jerome Powell. So who knows, maybe even tax increases don't matter anymore. I have to keep that possibility open in my mind. But if I were sitting in Joe Biden's seat or Kamala Harris's seat, and I was thinking, we're sitting on this big asset bubble that was blown under both Obama and Trump. So this is a very, very old bubble. And politically, I don't want to destroy my future, so I don't want this bubble to pop under me. I want to kick the can down the road as much as possible. So the last thing I would be doing is raising taxes right now. Because again, raising taxes is, similar to raising interest rates. Yes, it's different, but they're both forms of tightening. So no official plan has been released. Nothing's been introduced in Congress, but this is what we're hearing about so far. And so it will be interesting to watch this, but I just wanted to get my early thoughts on the record that, this would not be, good is the wrong word to say this is a bad thing, because I don't think it's a bad thing if stocks go down. I think stocks are overvalued, but from the perspective of Washington and of, the general establishment blob, I can't see how this tax increase would be a good idea for them. Unless they're just so arrogant as to think that the power of the Fed can overcome this. To me, I think the Fed is very weak. I think that we will see the emasculation of the Fed in due time, in only a few years, max, that is. I don't know when exactly it will be, but it's at the end of this business cycle, which will end eventually. When the next, when they finally do let the economy crash, we're really in a recession, as I said. It's just people don't feel it yet. Some people do, yes, but the pain is not nearly as severe as it is in reality. The pain is being numbed right now. The American people are being pumped full of monetary heroin to try and ease the pain, but once that wears off, once they build up a resistance to that and they keep having to take bigger and bigger hits, eventually, it's not going to work anymore. And that's when, we'll reach the end of this current expansion period. Well, we're at the end of the expansion period, as I said. But when this is over, there's no starting up a new business cycle like they did in 2009. There's going to be no recovery summer. And so whenever that end comes, I don't know, but raising taxes is not a way of staving that off for longer. So with that said, I think I'll end it here for today.